sometimes when I'm reading it, I get that same feeling that I would have, when I was, living rough and cocking the pistol every time I answered my door. You know what I'm saying? Afraid either the police or somebody's gonna come in and take all my pills or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it just it hits so hard if you've experienced extended periods of violence like that or living like that. And like you see how much of a point he was trying to make with every one of these characters and all of their traits, except for maybe the judge, because he's the only one.
Well, the judge has made that sort of shift from violence as sort of a monotonous means, right? He's shifted from that to considering it an end unto itself, right?
He has like a philosophy,
Yes,
it is
and
game.
and it's the philosophy that's actually my favorite, which I think is it's kind of a verbose like unpacking of yours essentially is this is a long paragraph, God.
Just go for it.
Yes,
it's all good.
Suppose two men at cards with nothing to wager save their lives. Who has not heard such a tale, a turn of the card? The whole universe for such a player has labored clanking to this moment, which will tell if he is to die at that man's hand or that man at his. What more certain validation of a man's worth could there be? This enhancement of the game to its ultimate state admits no argument concerning the notion of fate. The selection of one man over another is a preference absolute and irrevocable, and it is a dull man indeed who could reckon so profound a decision without agency or significance either one. In such games as have for their stake the annihilation of the defeated, the decisions are quite clear. This man holding this particular arrangement of cards in his hand is thereby removed from existence. This is the nature of war, whose stake is at once the game and the authority and the justification. Seen so, war is the truest form of divination. It is the testing of one's will and the will of another within that larger will, because it binds them, is therefore forced to select. War is the ultimate game because war is at last a forcing of the unity of existence. War is God.
That's it. God, that's so
Yeah.
good.
Crazy
God, man.
shit.
That is it right there.
And that is like, he's just got this, and that's the like and the interesting thing is, some of the comeback to that from the guys is not like arguing with his premise, but more just going, whatever, man. They've all got their own version of that in their head that they're kind of doing, or ignoring everybody.
And the judge is the only honest one about it. That's the thing. The judge represents this, like, y'all stop being fake about it, y'all. Or embrace the game, dance with me. Again, I feel like that was why I said earlier, I think the judge is the most perfect representation of American values that there's ever been in literature, man. That embodies it. I mean, America pretty much tells the world every single day, war is God. We can watch.
It's that you're in this, it's in a time period, certainly it's kind of a proto-fascist sort of thing, right? But you can see it in you can see it throughout history from that point onward, right? It's reducing the the human condition or human nature, such as there is one, to this endless conflict, to this endless struggle with some amorphous other. It's ever present, it's in a different form, but there always has to be something else that you set yourself against.
Right.
Yeah. And also, like, to double down on that, like, quote, you saying the American nature of the judge. He has another quote that I really like, is relative, but he says, and this is when somebody asks him, why do you spend so much time like obsessing over little things you don't know about, like little creatures, little bugs and stuff? He says, whatever exists, he said, whatever in creation exists without my knowledge, exists without my consent. He looked about at the dark forest in which they were bivouacked. He nodded towards the specimens he'd collected. These anonymous creatures may seem little or nothing in the world, yet the smallest crumb can devour us, any smallest thing beneath yon rock out of men's knowing. Only nature can enslave man, and only when the existence of each last entity is routed out and made to stand naked before him will he be properly suzerain of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And then a second later, he says, I wish every bird was in a zoo. It's like,
yeah,
damn.
it's an affront to him. Their freedom is an affront to him.
It's a personal insult because that's his land. He should own that shit.
The fucking suzerain.
Mm.
Who uses suzerain, bro?
Yeah,
Hey, that's
Come
pretty much what he's asked, you know.
And his friend's like, you could have said overlord. And he's like, it's not that deep.
Suzerain.
Yeah, suzerain, like the ruler of rulers, you know. A special kind of keeper, he says. A suzerain rules even when there are other rulers. His authority countermands local judgments.
Mm-hmm.
So fucking good.
Just reminds me of like the
accuracy,
dudes
baby.
in college where people be partying and he's just like, he shows up in a fedora and he's like trying to give like a monologue.
He's standing in the corner like nobody knows that my authority countermands local judgments.
Yeah. But the fact of the matter is when you're 7 feet tall and you look like that, you got to listen to him. He's
yes, you do.
but
When you're spoken like that.
He's just like he's got this idea behind he's figured it all out why his violence is okay while it's in fact morally good. He's figured out why it's so necessary, and in fact it's a moral good for him to have this pure conquest of nature, and why that's important and why that's holy. He's able to countermand the laws of morality and even the laws of God in the Bible by literally just, when some people say, hey, that doesn't sound biblical, he says, look at these rocks. These are the words of God.
Yeah.
And the idea is not into some interesting, science is like God speaking to us way, but in the, I just explained to you what that rock means. Therefore, my words are the words of God. And people are like, you might be onto something
All
there,
right.
Judge. Because when a 7 foot tall man with a shit ton of money that comes from who knows where, and that shoots perfect and speaks perfect and knows everything, says it, it makes a whole lot of sense.
I mean, he literally delivered them from like the first time when they meet him, they are in desperate straits, and then he saves the day. He completely delivers them, probably enthralling them from that moment, because they find him sitting on a rock in the middle of the desert with no fucking water and nothing.
Mhm.
He was just sitting out there. What the fuck was he doing? Nobody knows. He
And
didn't
you've
have
got
any
all these
supplies.
moments where he's just like walking around like butt naked. He does that all the time. He's naked all the time, even though he's completely hairless too. Like, and it describes him as looking almost like a baby, like a huge baby.
It keeps going back to that. It's either describing part of his limbs being huge or like a baby. Those are the two ways it goes. But it's so weird.
and he's like this gigantic, like overgrown child, basically walking around, and he's and has this like level of like confident, like this insane confidence. I think that's a lot of what the nakedness shows. There's also like this element of like sort of sexual violence that it doesn't make explicit all the time, but there's clearly some of that going on. And he is and he is in this way, like you talked about, representing American values, and in a lot of ways is like this representative of like the driving force of America, like whether or not Cormac is sitting there saying this is Lucifer or not. I don't think it matters so much, because this is still like the American spirit that is like driving people. Like, hey, like he's showing up and he's got all these high-minded ideas that are obviously bullshit, but he's able to enforce them and make them seem impressive because he's big and he's got money and he's talented
smart
at killing people.
And he's good at talking.
And he is genuinely good at what he does in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he carries himself with and it might be a stretch here. This is kind of half formed, but regarding the him as the ultimate 7 foot tall gorilla who's also like a enormous baby looking thing, right? It's that contradiction that that I think really defines him, right? He has
good point.
Well, like America, right? He has that, because
Whoa.
Well, exactly right, because it's the America is described as well-meaning but bumbling by people who believe in the particular exceptionalism of the country, right?
This big, stupid, violent baby,
Well,
but that
yes.
also knows everything
Yes,
about the
exactly.
world because of it. Yeah.
He has the perfect innocence that stems from arrogating to oneself the right
Yep.
to stand in judgment of all
Mm.
else.
The judge
Mm.
he doesn't have a courtroom. He's just the judge.
He's just
Mhm.
the judge of
And
all
and
of it.
it's like a situation where he's invincible, where you have the pastor, like you're not going to be able to kill him. He's unkillable, he's
Yep.
unstoppable. And also he can be undermined by the smallest bug. If he doesn't control every little thing, then all hell will break loose.
Mhm.
This
Yeah.
idea of like somehow, because you have this idea of like the United States needs to control everything, or who knows what will happen.
Uh-huh.
But also the United
Uh-huh.
States is indestructible. How's this shit the same at both times?
Exactly. God
Because
damn, that was
it's
such a good
Judge
point.
Holden, man.
Yeah, dude. That it really it's you talking about that before adding the baby thing to it. Yeah, this I'm really coming into I'm feeling better and better about this thing I just said fucking randomly on Twitter this morning. But
No, that's
Mhm.
exactly what I was thinking when I was reading the book too, though. I think it fits so perfectly. And like you
it
can even say,
does.
okay, but there's this Satan stuff. And it's like, yeah, well,
The
America's
great
the great
Satan.
Satan.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the the nature of the judge being able to say whatever he needs to say at the time to
Mhm.
whoever, and him not having a real face, or them not a lot of time talking about like I don't honestly don't know what the fuck he believes. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
because he can switch it at any time. He can make you believe anything. Talk, the example of when he is doing the little introduction thing to the Mexican was he a general or he was leading a group of Mexican soldiers, and the judge is like walking him around and introducing him to everybody in the gang,
Mhm.
and
Mm,
Yeah.
how
yes.
each thing he does, and even the mention of like when he introduces him to the black dude, and starts speaking in Spanish, and talking about how like how that interaction goes with the language difference, and how they won't not shaking hands, and then he goes on to mention just quickly running over, the sons of Ham over here, he
Yeah.
doesn't understand. Like, it's so fucking crazy how he just does all that kind of shit. And if that ain't America, I don't know what is. You know
Yep.
what I mean? Just talking whatever shit needs to be talked, lying about what the fuck ever, saying whoever to manipulate the audience. I mean,
Mhm.
it's so many of these elements of the judge. It really really that's where my head goes.
Absolutely. And he is, at the end of the day, since he's met them all before and he's part of their, he helps, Glanton with recruiting and stuff. He is bringing these weird, outcast, disaffected second, third fail sons. And he's like a big part of what's bringing them into this battle or whatever.
Yeah.
And even when they go into, it's in chapter 14, when they go into just another small town, he's out there among the kids saying, "Hey, what's your name? All right, you come in here. Oh, yeah, you get a couple of your friends and whatever." And then
Hmm.
by the end of the chapter, those guys are running around with them. There's several moments in this book where they say, and they recruited a handful new from the town, and it doesn't really say their
Oh
names
yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're going to be dead before the chapter's out.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, and
Yeah.
they go through like 3 towns that they just completely lay waste to.
yeah, that they're like
Yeah.
they're accepted as heroes, and then they leave the town, and everyone's like just hiding from them. I mean,
Mhm.
especially in chapter 14 is a really extreme one because they show up and they're bragging about money, and they recruit all these like sort of beggar guys to like be in their crew, and they just start slaughtering animals. And then there's this like hostile tavern that's run by a German guy, and they just like drive him out and they take over it. Um, and there's this like interesting like, and then the merchants are all fighting each other to get to their money, and it's like
Uh,
almost this like introductory of American capitalism into this just village.
Yeah, like this force that just comes through, it dominates all over others just because by simply being what it is.
Yeah.
You know,
It even fights the other capital. It sees the German and squares up with them too. It's like, no,
right,
no, this is our territory, And
yeah.
that's kind of how imperial wars happen, actually, interestingly
And
enough.
they do that throughout, like you were saying, like just be, even if they aren't there to get receipts, they're just drinking. They're just there drinking, and it like will casually be like, oh yeah, they were just there drinking, but a bunch of people ended up dead.
Yeah, it'll say
Oh,
there's
yeah,
one
man.
time where it says they were drinking. A quarrel broke out that ended in whatever, and it's like happens so often that like when you hear that someone's gonna drink, it's just like, okay, someone's about to die. Like, it's interesting, and like you have these like weird little moments in the town. The towns have some like really, one of the freakiest moments in the book happens in the town, where the judge meets this little boy who's selling dogs. He sells a pair of puppies, and he does this whole game where he pays the kid way more money than the puppies are worth, and he does a little magic trick, pulls the gold coin out from behind his ear, takes the dogs and chucks them in the water. And then one of the members of the gang, one of the lesser members of the gang, Bath Cat, just shoots both of them. And the kid just like watches, and it's just like,
yeah.
And then the judge goes on his way and leaves this kid feeling morally responsible,
just for no reason other than to just
to mess with him, and also to like get Bath Cat in on this. And interestingly enough, you have earlier in the novel Bath Cat talking with Toadvine about, oh man, I don't like to shoot at wolves. And then like you have them having this conversation of not liking to shoot at wolves, and then later you have him killing these dogs. I don't know how it connects, but it's like the judge like taking him one step farther.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly, the judge is just like, here you go, buddy.
Yeah, he sees a dude wearing ears, like a necklace of ears, and says, man, I can make him worse. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, but another part of that thing with the kid is, and it's interesting how they handle this with the judge, because it keeps you on your toes about it, is his affinity, I'll say, for kids.
Yeah.
And how he treats them and what he does, because it never explicitly says. And it implies a lot of things. And then there's at one point where somebody mentions to Glanton, that a little girl had gone missing or something. And he's like, something about the judge, and he's just like, like he knows what time it is.
At the very like last part where they're getting overrun at the fortress, the judge has a naked young girl in his room too.
Yeah, I mean, like that. So it eventually gets that explicit when they're at the but
it builds up to it.
Barry. Yeah, but like before that, and you'll see, he'll be weirdly nice, but then something followed by something that's the most fucked up thing you've ever heard. And it's like like you were saying before, what gets his juice is fucking with people and turning them into something else.
Oh,
you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
Like, and that's what he's doing. It's like, that's what he's doing with these kids, even though it never explicitly says. You're like, you start to get, I did. It's some person I was talking to about it that was like, I was like, yeah, well, the judge fucks kids, dudes. That's not cool. I realize he says a lot of shit that you probably think is real cool if you're a tough guy. But how do you account for the fucking of kids, bro? That's not cool. And he's like, what? No, the judge
my
didn't
God.
do that. Like,
man.
and it was and again, I think that's a clever way to deliver that. I think that again, it's on purpose, because nobody wants to believe that about America either.
No.
But every day it is our business here in America to fuck kids. That's what happens every day in America. It's man.
And that really colors that and years later when he tells the kid, now become the boy, I could have been like a father to you. That really colors that statement too, in a really creepy way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. and that's the final. That's what we leave them on, isn't it? The kid goes into that outhouse and there's the judge, and then we just never see either of them again. Well, we see the judge dancing.
Yeah.
Well, we can get to that because I have a few things to say about that. But to center more, we've gone like I said, the middle of this novel is it's not plot less in the sense of not a lot of plot is happening, but it is just sort of a lot of acts of distinct violence. They go from town to town, they do violent things in the town, they get payment for the violent things they do to native folks out of the town. There's a run-in with some folks that are mad at them, and they say they're going to pay them off in whiskey, and then they screw them over on the whiskey. Like that's a lot of that is happening, and it's interesting, but like it's just it's violent act after violent act after violent act. They're in Yuma territory for a time. A lot's happening. Well,
the main thing being that that eventually it doesn't matter who they're killing.
It's crossed over.
There's one. The Miguel, the only Mexican fella in the gang, which Glanton just refuses to call by a Mexican name because that's how fucking racist he is. He just calls him McGill to makes him Irish just because he doesn't like saying a Mexican name. He gets killed in one of the scuffles, and I don't think people are going to be able to tell. And he'd done this before. I don't think people are going to be able to tell where these scalps came from as long as they got dark hair.
Yeah.
And so they just start, we getting receipts from everybody.
And it's like a situation where the people who pay them because they're scared of them are putting out bounties on them the next day.
Yeah.
And it's a thing where if by any, objective measure, Glanton's time is running out, if Glanton was smart, he would run far, and he would come up with a different line, get in a different line of work. I hear there was a gold rush happening around then. Maybe become a prospector out in some faraway mine, but he needed to get a different line of work. But that's not
kind of hints that he knows that, though. With and again, this is one of those things that just kind of comes along in that section of they're escorting the entertainer and the fortune teller. There's that whole scene, which is a bit confusing the first time you read it, but still, you could tell there that Glanton don't want to see what's coming. He kind of knows where things are headed, and he doesn't need to be told it, and he explicitly doesn't want to be shown it.
And I mean, notably, he's already kind of in hell. You have you have them wandering the waste. At one point, they come across human heads, and both the judge and Glanton kick the heads, and the heads are set up in such a way. It's described. It's the way the heads pop out of the ground. I forget the exact number, but it's the exact number and way they're described in Dante's Inferno as coming out of the ground. And the kick is like when Dante kicks the skull, and it's kind of a joke in Dante's Inferno, but it's this. He's in hell. He's legit. There's nowhere else for him to go. If he dies, the hell doesn't want him. He's probably not. It's the idea of the guy that's too bad for heaven or hell. That's kind of the situation that he's in. And they're already in Texas, in this burnout part of Texas and Mexico is like hell. And it's this war that they're fighting. And they live in this. And it is this interesting, and since the middle of the novel is so difficult to talk about plot wise, because it is this liminal space. It's you even have the judge talks about hey, there used to be people here, and look in rock, you could see, this outline, and, he's referring to these ancient civilizations. He's but so many have been washed away. And you can see that the only time really you see this fear at the heart of the judge is when it's this idea of not being immortal, this idea of being washed away, being like the people he kills.
Yeah, he says that the stoneworkers, right, have this special sort of indelible place in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those.
But even then, stone, they wear away though. The stone will wear away, and the judge has this fear of death. It's it's the only real thing, and it's not he's afraid of getting killed. Exactly. The bullet's not going to take down the judge. It's not that.
He's just afraid of not being in control anymore.
Yeah.
Or not being able to,
and history whiling him away in some abstract sense. And he's this idea of no, I will be here forever. I am eternal, which is
never die.
Kind of an empire idea. Every single empire. It reminds me of that, a Rome or Imperial China or all these different things from the ancient day, very old idea. Or the sun never sets on the British Empire kind of shit. And it's a very American version of, well, if in the new version is, oh, if I out science it and out conquer it and out history it and out catalog it, and I'm gonna, I don't know, go to Mars and live forever, that kind of shit. That's the
Yep.
American version, and that's where this comes from, and
That's
that's
exactly it.
the one look into Judge Holden's fear, because Judge Holden's not afraid of getting shot. He walks out in front of bullets. He walks out in front of the kid and is like, "You're not going to shoot me," and he's right. He's not going to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But you see a little nerve when they talk about a lot of people lived here, and now we don't know who any of them are.
Right.
And that part really
Yeah,
got
that's
to
a good
me.
point. Yeah. Yeah,
I
man.
will say it's not. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll say after that.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I will say it's not my my number one quote. I was almost going to come from that, but then it was there was a quote that was that summed up the dialogue so well that I wanted to do that. It's
Okay.
simple. There's just they come across some prospectors and one guy's been shot, and it's clear what's going to happen, and they've got a guy with him. He kind of knows what he's doing doctor wise. And he, a little bit, and he walks up to him and he says, "What have you done for him?" "Ain't done nothing." "What do you want me to do for him?" "Ain't asked you to do nothing." "That's good, because there ain't nothing to be done." And I don't know why, but for me, that felt so much of like the ethos at the center of them, like so much of it.
Yes, it's so
Mhm.
perfect. And the way it's delivered, the language used to deliver it, the plain, it's just
Mhm.
it's perfect. It's so perfect.
Mhm. And it's like one of the only times in the novel I did I cracked a smile even a little bit.
Yeah.
Even though it's dark, they're talking about a dude with a shot, like he's been shot right in front of them, like it's fucked up.
Mhm.
But like there's a little
Oh
bit of back
man.
and forth there, But it's interesting. But one thing I was going to ask, because we mentioned it a second ago, we talked about the entertainers and the guy that came across in the town. One thing that I found interesting is the character of I don't, do they refer to him as the idiot or the moron or
I
is
was gonna say,
Yeah,
yeah, I
what's
was
his
wondering if
whole
we were gonna
deal?
talk about that. No, so again, I think this is one of those weird. I think he was there. I mean, well, obviously there for his interaction with the judge, and it was trying to make a point about how the judge, you can never tell if he's going to embrace someone, and do something like weirdly nice or intriguing to try to impress them or whatever, or if he's just going to be fucked up and horrible,
Mhm.
going to rape them to death. Like you don't know, you
Mhm.
never know. And the whole time you're like, because you've already been established, that's already been established about the judge. So when the idiot comes along, it's just like, oh god,
Mhm.
oh god, this
His name
dude.
is James Robert Bell, right? And just like for context, I just wanted to say for context for those who may not have like read the book, just like really quick before we get too much into it. He's basically just a severely mentally disabled guy that's being kept in a cage by his older brother and basically shown off like a geek show or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, two
Like at a
bits and you can
carnival.
see him, and his brothers
Yeah.
thinking of lighting out for California and showing him off there for 4 bits.
Yeah. Anyway, you can keep going. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I just realized that we didn't
Yeah,
really
like,
define him. I just
yeah,
kind of
I
started
just
Mhm.
used the
talking.
name. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But he's literally chewing on a turd, the
Yeah.
first time you
Literally.
see
Mhm.
him. Like, so and from the first bit of interaction that, the judge has with him and what's going on there, I remember that specifically getting to that the first time I read it, being like, oh God, oh, now we're about to get real fucked up. I can already
Yeah.
see what's going on here.
Mhm.
And you expect it, but then again, how that ends up, and I guess the thing with the ferry is a pretty important part. I don't know if we're there yet, but that's kind of
We're
when
close.
that's when the idiot thing really comes to fruition, and when that story kind of plays out. But him, you know essentially they go take over this ferry, just take it from a dude, take over
Mhm.
this river crossing, um, make doing shady backroom shit with the Indians, getting them to, the judge again, creating war, creating conflict, convincing Indians to come and kill a bunch of folks, and then turning on them when they get there, just so they can have a conflict, so they can take this place over. And he's got, these, they're charging people to do the river crossing. They've got regular people coming through all the time, and the judge is as it's almost like this little fiefdom, but when you see at the end of it, you've got the judge with a little girl naked and the idiot in a room. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like again, he took this person and made him into something, made him do stuff, made him do,
Yes.
Fuck
transformed
shit.
him.
Yeah. And when he has the vision of the judge after he gets his surgery, he says he no longer sees the idiot, but he sees this like great figure that the judge obscures in its place, like helping forge like what the
Yeah.
judge is judge of. And that's parts is very high-minded, but it's like this replacement. But like you have like this really like the final, not final, but one of the final show albums with the judge is he's literally walking the dude on a leash. And it's like dark. It's also worth noting though, I feel like this is like we know Cormac McCarthy's favorite novel, I should have said it earlier, is Moby Dick, right?
Yeah.
And there's like some real Captain Ahab stuff going on here, more with Glanton, I think, than with the judge. But it is worth noting that in Moby Dick, what's his name? Pip, who goes crazy after the whaling accident, does like become like Ahab's core confidant towards the very end. And he's like whispering he's the only guy he'll talk to, even though he's been this minor thing this whole time. So like maybe there's something there too.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Or maybe it's just like a situation you read the book enough times, it colors your like how you write. I don't know.
And the thing is, like, it's a very you see the I hate calling him the idiot, but that's
that's his name. That's his name, like in the book.
Though,
like,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, and pretty much, it's his name, it's his identity, it's at this point is his nature, and it's emblematic of, he's a facet of the judge himself, right? I mean, the judge surrounds himself with people that he can act on in the case of, children, or that he can act through in the case of, the idiot, somebody who's
Glanton, honestly.
Or Glanton, somebody who's completely surrendered their agency, whether it's, surrendering their intelligence entire, to the extent that they had any, or giving oneself wholly to this endless pursuit, this endless cycle of wealth violently extracted and then frittered away, right, necessitating more wealth to violently extract, right? And it's striking to me, I think, that you see this vision of him like toward the end with the forger dude, because he's making coins. The dude's making coins with which
with like the judge's likeness on him, right?
With the judge's likeness, and of this is the judge. Not merely the coins, but the the previous sentence here, right? He is at contriving from cold slag, brute in the crucible, a face that will pass, an image that will render this residual specie, this currency, current in the markets where men barter, right? So, he's again, he's seeking out what makes men tick, and then he's just appointing himself God King of that, right? Whether it be, and I don't think it's an accident that he's using cold hard cash toward the end here, right? It's a shift, I think. It's a shift, I think, from the violence that we've been directly observing to what ultimately drives it, the economic and the material markers of the contexts that give rise to it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I don't. It is interesting, and I feel like I bounced off the question of the idiot and exactly what he represents, and I don't have I don't think I have a perfect answer. But yeah, I think you're onto something. It colors the judge. It also, it's another facet of, I think McCarthy in this book is also interested with the idea of the entertainer and different ideas of entertainers, and that's another thing. This is like this idea of the geek is a very much like a circus mainstay at this time and for many years to come after this time. So I think that's a big part of it too. because he has the fortune tellers, he has jugglers, he has the judge doing magic tricks and doing playing his fiddle and saying everyone can dance. And he talks about how everybody's like part of this like cosmic ritual or whatever the hell. And so this is also part of that. I think it's and I can't think of like geek shows now without thinking of Nightmare Alley. That movie.
Yep.
But it's that kind of thing though. I think that's also part of it. And also you have an interesting moment where you have some women who it's like one of the only acts of compassion in the entire novel.
Yep.
Try to take care of this guy. They try to dress him up and they try to wash him off. And I mean, and he immediately like gets confused by it all and nearly dies. And the judge saves him from drowning himself afterwards. And that's when he becomes completely like the judge's under the judge's
thing. Yeah, that sort of like weird, man, that's such a scene, carrying him out of the water and stuff like that. Like, yeah, that it read stuff like that. Like, I get my thing with that whole section is like, I'm supposed to be understanding. There's more to this, and I don't fucking get it.
I do know that the top of the chapter, when it's laying out the chapter, it describes that part as the baptism. And that's interesting.
And that's kind of like you can feel that when you're reading it too, but it just always kind of escaped me where he was going with that.
Guess there's got to be some mystery to it, because I even like browsed online, like seeing what people had said about it. And like you see people say Moby Dick and some people are like, well, it's actually, and they'll do like an obscure historical thing. And it's like, I didn't read anything that made me feel too confident in what it was.
I've watched hours and hours and hours and hours of collegiate lecturers discuss this book. And nobody ever talks about the idiot. Nobody ever talks about it. Nobody ever brings him up. I mean, there's plenty of other stuff to talk about. I've just never seen.
Oh, sure. It's just that. It's a thing, but it's like, man, I will say he really does add a layer to that confrontation in the desert when he's literally walking the dude on like a leather leash. Like, he's carrying the parasol.
Crazy image.
Oh my God.
It occurs to me, there is, sorry to cut you off.
No, go for it.
There is another act of compassion, or at least an attempted one, toward the very end of the book. Right at the end of page 22, it's page 328 if you have the 25th anniversary version. It's where the kid finds the group of penitents. I mean, that is the land of penitents. The group of penitents that's been hacked to pieces in the desert by some other party before him. One very much like his, or maybe it's Comanches or whoever, right? And he sees an old woman kneeling in between the rocks and praying. And he's like, oh, okay, so here's somebody who's somehow survived and who's waiting on salvation, And he goes up to her. He's speaking in Spanish to her. He's like, hey, I'll get you to a safe place. Can you hear me? And she's not living. She's a corpse. She was just a dried shell, and she had been dead in that place for years, right?
Yeah.
It's that one shred of trying to make some kind of human connection, trying to give back to to a people that you've taken so much from, and by then it's too late.
Yeah, there is another moment of compassion as well when a group of American Indians does find them in the desert, and by them I'm referring to the kid and Tobin, the ex-priest. They do find them in the desert after sort of the final battle or whatever, and they do save their lives, give them some water, give them some food.
Oh, this is when the kid gets an arrow through his leg.
But let's backtrack just a little bit, because we've danced around it. We talked about the ford or the ferry, and this is really where it's hard to even say where the climax of the novel is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I wanted to say climax, but then I was like, wait a second, hold on now. Maybe like the big conflagration.
If it was a movie, it's the climax.
Yeah,
in the 3-act structure of like a film.
Yeah, they're trying to do it, and I feel like the Yuma massacre is the logical like third act, like the denouement after that.
Mhm.
Okay.
But yeah, you have this whole moment where you have, well, not this whole moment, you have basically the Glanton Gang, kicked out of just about everywhere in the country, in both countries, has gone to this ford where people basically get ferried across. And they take it over. There's this guy who was running it before because you can make good money doing it. They take it over. The dude had a cannon there, so they set it up. They basically build a fort. It's the only place you can ford the river. Another group tries to set up a ford, and they just shut down their operation. And basically, they just make bank of people coming across the river. And at first, they charge them, an arm and a leg, and eventually, they just start robbing people. And it's these huge wagon trains that are going out towards California. In the mid-century here, people, between people pursuing gold and people pursuing moving out west and all of this, they're just able to rob people blind, and they build up. It's as Glanton's not even looking at how much money he has. He's just continuously dumping more money on the pile. It's crazy. And this is where at this point Glanton is like, if there was any question, that the dude is like mad out of his mind. Like the dude is just like,
Yeah.
he's descended now, like,
Yeah.
just crazy eyed or whatever. And it's at this point that the Glanton Gang, they get their comeuppance eventually. It's at this point where they've just, like I said, Glanton should have gone and hid somewhere far away. They should have all dispersed and took up a new line of work. None of them could do it, and eventually, and this group of folks, I mean, and they get driven away. They get destroyed by is it Yuma Indians who defeat them here?
Yeah,
Yes,
and
yes.
this is one of those interesting things that I will say about plot wise
Mhm.
is there's there's all this cool subtext with the plot of who is really running the show and who is actually directing these events. It doesn't come out and tell you, that basically once the judge comes into the picture, he is the catalyst in every conflict that happens one way or another, and if he'll find a way to make it so, even if it ain't going to be so, he'll find a way to make it so. And it is sort of, playing both sides with the Yumas is where you really get to see the most of that,
Yeah.
because he knows they need to get back out and do the game. And I mean, he knows that some shit's going down. He's like, well, that's what I'm here to do. Let's make it happen. And if I'm remembering correctly, it doesn't ever like explicitly tell you that he set up his own people to get fucked up, but it is implied.
Yeah. And he certainly doesn't seem worried about it.
Exact. He's ready for it. In fact, he is waiting
Mhm.
in his room with a fucking howitzer under his arm.
Yeah,
God, that was
crazy,
such a Giga Chad move.
Fucking
dude, that was the
crazy
moment where
shit,
I
man.
was like, I almost like imagined him like in a Fallout game. Like
Yep.
the
Good point.
you could see the judge like modded in to like Fallout New Vegas.
Absolutely.
Like literally
Absolutely.
holding a lit cigar over the touch hole of the thing, just easy to please.
Honestly, like I'm
Oh
not
my
saying that there
God.
should be a movie adaptation of this. I don't think it'll work, but I would like to see that scene.
Mhm.
I
I
would like
would
to
like
see
to,
that.
yeah, that's I mean, there's a few scenes that I would really like to see. There's a few that I don't at
Oh
all.
yeah. And there's a
But
few that I'm just like, you can adapt this, but
well,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
that's
but
the thing. Like, I just don't see it, but because of that thing I talked about earlier, you have to show the kid going one way or another. If
mhm.
you make it
Mhm.
into a film, you have to show how much the kid participated. And the
Yeah.
book very explicitly does not want to show how much the kid had participated in like the real fucked up stuff, because they want, it seems like he wants the reader to decide how much the kid, wait, is the kid killing babies too? Surely not.
Mhm.
But you get to decide, because it doesn't ever say how do you can't get past that in a film. How do you, I mean, I guess you could, there's probably somebody that could do it, but it's gonna be tricky. That's a tricky thing without saying which way the kid goes one way or another, showing exactly what the kid does.
Timothy Chalamet is the kid.
Oh my God.
Dude, I said that. I knew my buddy as soon as my buddy Savage is like on the Cormac Reddit stuff and whatnot, and everybody's speculating about the movie, have been for years and years, and he was like, Timothy Chalamet gonna play the kid, right? I'm like, shut up, dude, shut up.
Yeah, you're gonna need somebody who looks like he's been punched a handful of
Yeah.
times more than Timothy Chalamet. I don't hate Timothy Chalamet in Dune just because he's supposed to be a pretty boy in that.
Yeah, oh, he's
Like-
good for certain things.
But
Great.
but yeah, no, you need a guy who looks like he's been through the ringer, and that's why
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
for this kind of
one of the
thing.
first things that ever happens to the kid is he gets shot by a boatman twice.
Yeah, yeah, that's just like, yeah, it's like welcome to puberty. You've been shot twice in the growth plate. Like it's crazy, man. But yeah, so they have this slaughter this well-deserved slaughter. Like, you don't feel bad for these guys. Like, they need to, they
Glanton gets his real good.
oh yeah, he gets fucked up, and like, and as he should. But you have this, and then you have this moment where it's just the kid and Tobin, that the ex-priest, they managed to be they kind of managed to escape. The kid's got an arrow through his leg. And they fall in, they run into the judge and the idiot at one point in this pit, and the judge is like, does this whole thing where he's like, how much money is X worth or whatever, like how much money is it worth to buy your hat off you in the desert. He's trying to buy the gun from the kid. He's like, he's got all this money, he's got this real very satanic feeling moment of like doing this devil's bargain, and at that point, Tobin's like, you just got to kill him right now. And the kid just decides, no, he's not going to kill him. And then you have this moment after that that's like very much a standoff kind of thing. You have, the judge pursuing him, and it feels very, it's a very tense scene of him like crawling through these like these messed up these messed up old like riverbeds that are like dried out, and hiding in a well and like crawling around, and shots are going, and you've got Tobin in the kid's ear giving him the worst advice of all time. like, oh no, shoot there. Like, and he just doesn't know what he's talking about. Tobin immediately tries to do something, gets shot through the neck, somehow survives that. We don't really even know what happens to him for too long after that. But, and you have this final sort of standoff where they're running from the judge, because the judge is like full murder mode. He's got rifles. He's got this horrifying moment where he has a parasol that's made out of this bone of this ancient animal, and it's with skins. And he's taken Tobin's old hat and split it down the middle, and he's wearing it on his head. So there's this hat that's like cut in half, and he's almost completely naked, and he's got the idiot on a leather leash crawling in front of him, and he's like hunting him down.
The judge in this, last when he's in full on freak show mode, and at his most terrifying, and being this like culmination of all these weird things, or all these with the parasol and the hat and the guy on a leash, it again makes me think of the culmination of and how it ties to America, and Judge being American as fuck, is like in its most terrifying and most like what it becomes after all of that shit, and when it's doing its thing like as it wants to do it, just being like this hodgepodge of violence and debauchery and perversity and manipulation, in like in its most wild, visually wild form,
which is part of the it's part of the kind of the myth, like the meme of America and its military bearing, like the character of its military, as you will. Again, that kind of bumbling giant. I've heard it said that the United States practices chaos on a daily basis in terms of its military, right? And that's what makes it so dangerous, right?
Yeah.
And on the one hand, you know, you from a military background, and I've seen people with military backgrounds meme about this. You know, that can be endearing, but you know, you look at it from the other side. Imagine being on the receiving end of something that is um you know that is inscrutable or operates by laws fundamentally different from your own, right? I mean,
Right.
you see it in the Glanton Gang's confrontation of increasingly formidable foes, right? You know, you go from massacring villages to fighting groups of Indians, to they run into the Mexican army and they win. I
Yeah.
mean, where do you go from there if you're in their path?
Right.
Mm.
It's
And
it's
Yeah.
it,
it's a force of nature, truly, or
Yeah.
seems that way.
and it's interesting, you know, talk about the spectacle of it. Like, let it
Yeah.
never be forgotten. Let it never be forgotten that at the start of the attack on Iraq, at the beginning of the Iraq War, you know, about 20 years ago, what do they call it? Shock and awe.
Shock
They
and awe.
timed the beginning of the bombing campaign not to the time when it would have been the most strategic with the light, but to the time when the most Americans were going to be at home watching TV.
Mm-hmm.
They started the bombing campaign right at, I think it was like 7:30 or whatever time that they calculated the most people were going to be Eastern time tuning into their television sets. It was actually would have been more convenient to do it at a different time. And that's not what McCarthy's writing about specifically. This was written before that. But my point
But
is,
yeah.
that's so inherent, that like
Yep.
showmanship, that freak showmanship that
This-
no one asked for, that no
this
one likes.
ritual slaying on a global scale.
Yep.
It's notable. I had a stupid thought today while I was thinking about this book driving around. I thought, you know, like the operator guys who come back from Iraq, and like there was this like whole thing where they were like making like Black Rifle coffee, and they had all these like different brands and shit like that. Y'all remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was imagining like Judge Holden and like the Glanton Gang, like their own versions of like stupid like PNC, like Black Rifle coffee with the judge. It's like the same shit though. Like, you know,
Yeah.
like,
No. Yeah.
I remember there was like a group of like guys, and they were like ex-SEALs, and their whole thing was like, we made coffee and we put some like pork in it so Muslims can't have it. Like, and how is that any less
Jesus
stupid?
Christ.
How is that any less stupid than like what we have in this book? Like, it's the same. It's just,
yeah, it's the same mindset. It comes from
but
the
with
same
bigger
place.
guns.
Yeah. And there's also something to be said about like anybody that has hung out with military dudes or been in a military setting, you know, when they're just chilling, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's weird. Stuff gets real weird with them with them folks whenever they're just you know, when they're sitting in the barracks or bullshitting or drinking or whatever. It gets like some of the wildest, you know, we partied, but the military boys get extra wild because it's like in that situation, you know, with all those pressures and all the other factors going on, there's like an extra, I guess maybe it's because engaging in war requires you to do certain things a certain way, and so whenever they're not actively engaging in the war, it's just like fuck it, shit show, wild the fuck out.
Just the absurdity becomes the point.
Absurdity becomes the point. There it is. That's what I
Mhm.
was looking for. Well said. Thank you, my friend. That's exactly
and
it.
the same way about like the sort of like operator groups, you know, Blackwater and these kind of mercenary groups, that kind of thing. It's a very
Mhm.
similar mindset. In fact, there's a lot of like comparisons to be drawn between like certain like big, you know, professional military contractors and, you know, this sort of Glanton Gang that we've now
Holy shit.
we
That
have
is-
like Glanton Gangs, hundreds of thousands of them en masse, and they've got billion-dollar budgets.
LLCs and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, we got
Like,
dudes who get rich off this shit now.
that is what I mean. Let's be real. If the judge were around today, I mean,
Oh,
what's the
he would
dude's name?
be
Eric Prince. Is that the
yeah,
guy that
Eric
runs?
Prince. That's exactly what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
That's him. That's
I mean,
fucking
like,
him.
they've recently, I say recently, this was, I guess, 2 years ago now, but like, you had mass pardonings of dudes who were Blackwater dudes who just open fired on just random civilians in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, you had these guys doing killings in schools, school children and stuff, and getting pardoned off of it. Just private guys that no rank, no anything. They're former military, brought over there. They do these things. And it's like, man, like, you just gave the Glanton gangs repeating rifles. Like,
there is a
drones.
there is a certain culture around and it's not even necessarily in isolated to the private military spheres as well. I was reading the other day that there's actually the single biggest group, not that there isn't like a lot of poor folk making up the rank and file of the military these days, but the single biggest group comes from the top quintile of wealthiest neighborhoods in the country. Like it rivals
like the sort of the college, like the officer corps, and that kind of thing.
Your military family that's been doing it for generations,
right?
Like your dad was a Marine and your grandfather was a Marine. Like a predictor a fair predictor of your likelihood of military service is knowing other military people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's a cycle of violence kind of thing.
My dad was a Marine.
Yeah.
And before he died, the only thing he ever made me like outright promise him was that I would never give the United States my life.
Oh, yeah.
He told me straight up, he was like, I did it. I'll show you all the cool shit I learned. I learned some cool shit. I'll show you. Don't ever give them your name and number. Don't ever do it. And that was, because I mean, you know how it is. Growing up poor, there was many times where I was just like, fuck, I guess I'll just go do this then, but Dad was in the back of my head. And I, because he probably saw it, it does stuff to your head, ain't no coming back from,
Right.
Even if you don't see combat, even if you are just, a part of that culture for long enough and ingrain that mindset, into the way you live, like it can do things.
and that is like a big part of the reason that, like, man, when we do get a chance to like do organizing and work with veterans who really have managed to come around on things, have managed to see what they were part of and like wanting to work, especially mostly it is folks who just like join for like the reasons of poverty and stuff. That is like always so notable, and they always have such a useful perspective and stuff like that. Because like it is interesting. And of course, like I just want to like, there's obviously like that line on that stuff, and it is an interesting thing. And
absolutely.
And obviously that's very different than what we're talking about, but I think there is a through line, because like we were saying at the beginning, there is, the sort of the blood that's spilled in this book is soaked into the dirt we're standing on,
Yes.
And even though it describes the sun boiling it away and time coming and things being built, it's still here. And I don't mean that in like some like woo-woo magical way. I just mean in like the sense of like, that is what it is built on. The traditions we have, or come from there. The heroes we're taught to revere come from that. Our laws, a lot of them were written then with those things in mind, and our structures are handed down in that way. And so when we look at how to make a better world, right? When we look at how to improve the world we live in, it's important to, when we think about like the concept of reform and what that even means. You have to look at like what's the thing you're trying to reform even built on, man.
Exactly.
Like, you want, because like I'm just saying, like I don't care what you do to the building. If you got a bunch of Judge Holdens in the basement, if I got a Judge Holden in the basement, I'm burning that thing to the ground. That's all I'm saying.
And that's just it. Like, let's be real. Judge Holden ain't got shit on Andrew Jackson.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Judge Holden ain't got a
Body-wise,
goddamn thing on Andrew Jackson. And like,
or shit, Henry Kissinger. Like a Henry Kissinger type. Like people are living today, you know, like
right.
numbers.
And I've said this to somebody before. They were like, because we're talking about Blood Meridian, seeing if they should read it or not. And they're like, well, what's it about? And I'm like, and the easiest way I said, it's the story of how America was built. I mean, that was
Yes.
like the simplest answer I could give them. It is a realistic telling of how, people that look like me came to take over this whole country, and what
Yeah.
and how we set, and the path we set it on from then on out.
Yeah.
And that was, and I still think that really, that hits on. I don't know if that's what he meant. I don't, again, I'm not going to try to, because that's not how he got down. He said what he said, and he wanted us to take what we take from it, and that's what I take from it.
Yeah, I think that's important, and it's worth noting, like, and it does it in such a way that's interesting, because it doesn't do it in such a way that portrays the Glanton Gang, the kid, the judge, all of them as this group that comes in and then they live on the spoils they got, and because they did violence, they live happily ever after, right? The
Right.
people who did the violence don't see any rewards. All they see is death. They see horrible death as a result.
Yeah.
The judge is the only guy who walks away, and that's because he sort of represents the spirit of the thing.
Right. The eternity of it. The
Right.
the one who has embraced the game. And
the people
The
who
fail sons who were sent to die, like when we say they drown, like drown the land in blood, like their blood too, like,
Right,
their blood
right.
too. And that's
it's the people who are alive to tell the stories afterward that are they're endowed with this responsibility that if they're not lying, then they can't help but leave shit out. There's a really striking bit early on that initially I was looking at just purely as something funny, because Cormac McCarthy is a writer of was a writer of screenplays, so he has that certain cadence of, okay, this would be a really hilarious moment filmed, right? He has that comedic timing about him. And it comes up here on page 66 here, the kid spat dryly and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. A lizard came out from under a rock and crouched on its small, cocked elbows over that piece of froth, and drank it dry and returned to the rock again, leaving only a faint spot in the sand, which vanished almost instantly. Which, and in the moment, it's very blackly funny, right? The kid and this other person from his filibuster group who eventually dies. They're in this inhospitable land that will kill you graveyard dead, as Cormac McCarthy himself said, and then just erase any trace of you having ever been there. But then you zoom out from that as you go through the book, and you realize, oh, so not only are the victims themselves erased from the equation, right? But it's anything that they could have said, right? It's any semblance of the terror that bore down on them and scourged them away from the surface of the earth, right? McCarthy said, and this is in another context, right? He said, acknowledging Faulkner's influence on him, the novel depends for its life on the novels that have been written. Which is true. Like you're shaped by the narratives that you grow up around, and by the by the written word that you absorb, and the language and all that. But you also have to wonder, okay, who's been writing all that, right? Who's survived, as I said, to write that? It's the judge.
The judges have survived.
It's the people who could transplant one or another narrative onto and make sense of something retroactively, right?
And it makes one think of, I don't know if y'all have ever read, and I'm not even recommending the book, The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber. I don't really recommend it for
the debt dude.
Not really. He did write that, but I don't recommend the book because I don't think it actually has a very good analysis of way like society moves. but it makes a good point when it talks about Native people, right? And it says
Mhm.
this. Over and over, it hammers home how much we just don't know and will never know and literally cannot know, right? Because so much was obliterated.
Hmm.
And it makes that point because the book tries to sketch what prehistory looked like and what society looks like that we don't know about. And it's an interesting thought experiment, but it hammers over and over again, even makes the point of in Europe and in Asia, all the richest societies lived on the coast. Those were the first to go. So we don't know what the wealthiest native societies looked like, and we never will. And it's like interesting things like that. And you can't help but think about that, like thinking about like, you know, this book and like that. And you're right. Like the books we read, you know, color us and shape us, and it shapes the mentality. And of course, the mindset we now have is handed down through the centuries through this. And you just think of the selectivity of what was destroyed and what wasn't. But the fact of the matter is, like the judge says towards the end of the novel, you know, if you see it all as a dance, you see it all as a ritual. The very fact of the matter is, not only were there people sacrificed on the altar of the ritual, you know, the native peoples, the Mexicans and whatnot were slaughtered on the altar of the ritual, but you also have the people doing the slaughtering were replaced in the dance before really most of them could even tell their stories. And a lot of them, you know, a lot of them bloodied the altar as well. And the people in the dance that the judge sort of scoffs at are the people who replaced it. But the interesting thing is that is in real life, the judge is the guy who replaces it. He is the guy who writes the narrative after the fact, the guy who writes the Western, who tells the tale.
Yeah.
And that's what's so that's what's so interesting about it to me. And like, and you have this, you know, and then you have at the ending of it, at the ending of the book, with the kid being one of the only survivors, some of the others getting hanged, he loses the priest, and it's just him and the judge, and he's now the man, he's an adult. And that's really where the book leaves off at that. And it's and he, you know, he's wandering the country, and you know, he's still in the cycle of violence as a 40 something, you know, kills a 15-year-old in like an altercation. Has this and the 15-year-old's just like him, you know, just like him a few years ago, you know, just like him, just a little dumbass.
Yep.
And he's coming across a guy who was doing his own adventures out in the West and doing just mass slaughter of the buffalo. And he said, we killed all of them. We killed all of them. You have him crossing these fields of bone, and all this stuff. And you have him finally come for this final reckoning with the judge. And he's going to this town. I forget what it is. Is it Griffith? Something like that?
Griffin.
Yeah.
Griffin. And it's, and the kids say that one of the kids who he kills, they say it's the greatest, that town is the greatest, you know, home of sin in the whole country. It's where all the sin is, where all the weather. And, you know, when the kid talks to the judge, he says, I didn't know you were here. One part of me thinks, though, he was making for the greatest hub of sin in all the country. I think he was going for his final reckoning. You know, I think the time was, he knew it was the time, you know.
Yeah.
And he has this final reckoning with his judge in this really bizarre scene. And I want to hear what y'all have to say about real bizarre scene where there's just to describe it, he's in a bar and just like, and there's a bear dancing. At first I thought it was symbolic. No, there was it's dead ass. It's a bear dancing around.
Bear.
And it gets shot in this sort of altercation that involves neither of them. And there's this real horrible scene of this girl crying over her pet bear that died. And it's very weird and strange. And once again, it comes back to this theme of like him liking like these like, you know, these like entertainer types, jugglers and minstrels and this, that, and the other. And you have the judge, and he has this like last talk where he talks about like the ritual and the war and the violence. And he says to the kid, now the man, you know, you're a disappointment to me, but I could have been like a father to you. And you know, this whole thing of like, we're the last two around, and you never gave yourself fully to the war. You never gave yourself fully to the blood. And this kind of insinuation that the reason he's alive is because he's somehow a coward for not giving himself fully. And the kid too is, and he's like, and you never learned truly how to dance. And the kid too is like, you know, to his credit, says something like, hey man, even that bear could have danced before he died. You know, he kind of rejects it towards the end. And then you conclude with the kid. He goes and has sex with a prostitute for a second. or fails to. It's unclear. It's a bad experience for him. And he goes to like, where people are pissing, like some outhouses or whatever. And the judge surprises him, and the judge is completely naked and grabs him. And then it cuts to people later looking in the outhouse where they were, and the people won't even say what they see, but they're horrified. And then the novel concludes with the judge on the dance floor dancing and playing music, and everyone loves him, and he will never die. And it says it over and over. He's beloved by all, and he will never die. He's beloved by all, and he will never die. And that's where it ends, aside from the epilogue, but I can't get to that quite yet. And I don't know, what do y'all think? What the hell is this last few pages?
Well, I think adding the sexual element into it with the prostitute there at the end, and it being a unsatisfying experience, kind of sets the stage, for the judge to fuck him to death.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like what it's saying happens. Like, I know it doesn't say it literally, but like,
pressed him against his enormous flesh is the closest thing you get. That's the phrase he uses, I think.
He certainly was naked when he killed him and like pulled him into like a death hug.
But adding the with the, like you were saying before, the mention of I could have been like a father to you, the issues we know Judge having throughout the rest of the book, and it never being explicitly said, right? I think that's another clue. Because it is not explicitly said there at the end. It's just another situation. You have been primed this whole time for the judge to be doing horrible, fucked up rape shit behind the scenes.
Yeah,
and then you're given that at the end.
And it's not even. I was going to describe the prostitute scene as such as it is, as fade to black, but it doesn't even fade. It just skips.
Yep.
You're just meant to fill in the blanks yourself.
Yeah.
And what do we make of the judge like having this sort of, coming out on top, as it were, and everybody liking him, and he will never die, as it says.
I mean, he's playing the game. He's dancing. Everybody likes games. Everybody likes to dance.
It's true. And he has this moment a few pages before that where the kid is having, an ether dream. Like literally he's on ether and he's having a dream where when we talked about it already, where you see the judge like putting his own likeness along with the idiot transformed into this forge master guy onto money, and like wanting to go forward to the markets, and that when the markets awaken, he'll put forth so there's like this tie-in of money, and there's this tie-in of music, and this tie-in of sexual violence. And man, the judge is scary as hell. Like I don't really know how else to put it.
That's why the only way I could sum it up, I mean, the devil thing makes sense, and obviously the book is heavily inspired by Cormac writes heavily inspired by the King James and biblical references and all that stuff, and it seems like that's like the obvious thing. Oh, he's representing the devil or whatever, and people are always going to love the devil. They're all the devil is an angel of music and all that kind of stuff, and like there's a lot of those things, but the weirdness of it, and again, like it's just as much inspired by America as it is the King James. I feel like is I guess is my point. Like I think you could make the argument that like and especially being the time that Cormac wrote it, like knowing when he wrote it, specifically trying to with the anti-Western thing in mind, anti-American hero shit. So that's why to me it feels like it's going a lot for that comparison of these are the men who built America, and they are still celebrated. Nobody talks about all the horrible shit they did. Like I said, I mean, now we do a little bit more, but in 1985, Andrew Jackson was a hero. Nobody talked about the horrible shit he did, George Washington probably got some grimy, nasty, fucked up shit he did. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
George Washington literally preferred mixed race slaves because he believed they were smarter than full black slaves.
Oh God.
Like there's all sorts of rancid shit in his history.
See, I don't know nothing about it, but I just, you know, but again, at the time when Cormac wrote this, it's still, you didn't talk about those kinds of things.
Right, absolutely.
He would have been a renegade for going against the classic American hero story, and in every sense. And, you know, maybe I'm not saying like he was making the connection of like, yeah, he Holden is the devil and America. America is the great Satan. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that like it's not far fetched to think that he would have made some comparisons to, you know, the American empire and you know how it was formed and being and informing how it continues today. So maybe I am reading too much into it, but I don't know.
I think a good way to put it is he's the devil, but he's our devil, you know?
Yes.
Like he's the American devil. Like
yeah.
he is, even if Cormac McCarthy isn't sitting here saying, I'm gonna make a spirit of the United States, he is making the devil from the perspective of the all-American frontier mind. What is the frontier devil? And the frontier devil is, whether that's Cormac's intention or not, the United States. So I think it really it plays out the same way either way.
Yeah.
Yes, and you know he again the kind of fever dream that it ends on. You know, the kind of just whirling dance of you know what's described and also the words itself. Yeah. Oh yeah, titties, exactly. Yeah, it's that shit there, right? He never sleeps. He says he'll never die. You know, it's you know, and how do we know he's saying these things? Because people are listening to him, right? You know, he's in the middle of all this dancing because there's music to dance to, because there is this scene that's being conjured, because there are these pleasures that are being, you know, pursued for, you know, however momentary a time, right? And it's I mean, it speaks to McCarthy himself. What I'm able to find about him is kind of fundamentally pessimistic about the course of humanity, certainly. Like as a whole, like there's no such thing as life without bloodshed. The notion that the species can be improved in some way, that everyone can live in harmony, is a really dangerous idea. Those who are afflicted with this notion are the first ones to give up their souls, their freedom. Your desire that it be that way will enslave you and make your life vacuous. That's this thing that he said, right? And it's interesting, right? Because it stands in contrast to, because I watched his interview with Oprah actually today, right? And he said, look, you know, like the road is, he described the road as fundamentally, in a way kind of carrying a positive message of, look, you know, be grateful for what you have. You know, life is good, life is precious, but I don't know exactly what to do with that. You know,
well, there's the whole carrying the fire thing, and definitely more positive. It seems like because he is putting out there that there are good guys that carry the fire, and that's not a thing that's usually in Cormac's books. You know, as far as like you know, most people don't carry the fire. Most people just set shit on fire. Or fuck watermelons or whatever.
Yes.
Like that's just they either do weird shit or they do fucked up shit most of the time. You know, so yeah, that is interesting, because it does the road having that because everything else you read, it does seem like it's just straight up, as the world is cold and ugly and you're scared as hell.
And it's dedicated to his son, you know, because it does come from a place of love,
right?
You know, and from a place of it wouldn't exist without him, you know, this human connection that you really don't find any other way.
Well, Tell me this. Do you think the epilogue of this book is about carrying the fire? What is this epilogue here?
Now that's where I was hoping to talk to people smarter than me.
I have an
Y'all
idea.
got
I have an idea
educations.
on it, but
He's got like a post hole digger or something. Like
yeah. Here, 1 second. It's not too long. I'll just read it.
yeah.
I got it right here. In the dawn, there is a man progressing over the plain by means of holes which he is making in the ground. He uses an implement with 2 handles, and he chucks it into the hole, and he enkindles the stone in the hole with a steel hole by hole striking the fire out of the rock which God has put there. On the plain behind him, there are wanderers in search of bones and those who do not search, and they move haltingly, like in the light, like mechanisms whose movements are monitored with escapement and palate, so that they appear restrained by a prudence or reflectiveness which has no inner reality, and they cross in their progress one by one that track of holes that runs to the rim of the visible ground, and which seems less the pursuit of some continuance than the verification of a principle, a validation of sequence and causality, as if each round and perfect whole owed its existence to the one before it, there on that prairie upon which are the bones and the gatherers of bones and those who do not gather. He strikes fire in the hole and draws out his steel. Then they all move on again. And for me, I wanted to read it all the way through just because it is the ending and it is a capstone to it. But my reading of it, and from reading some scholarship on this, I know this is an opinion, but this is just what I drew. Was I think it is just showing. I don't think it's more complicated than this. We're seeing the birth of industry. We're seeing the railroads. We're seeing the oil. We're seeing it's not one thing, but it's this it's the industrialization of this land that has been conquered through blood over the top of the bones, and some people are collecting them, some people aren't, and some people are doing a whole lot of things. And it's this idea of, okay, and here's how we got to now. It is like the linking event. You have the judge dancing, you have the creation of industry, you have the Industrial Revolution, fire being drawn out of rock, this almost like, this alchemical moment, very similar to what the judge does earlier in the book. And you have this moment of like sequence and causality, talking about how the holes owe existence to the one before it. That reminds me a lot of
across the plain. Yeah.
Right. And it reminds me a lot of how the judge says people can only go. He talks about causality, and he talks about a lot about causality and how we only come from things before us and how we only exist in arcs that we are tied to. It feels a lot to me like McCarthy describing the industrialization of the United States forged on the basis of the judge and the actions of the Glanton Gang. That's how I read it.
Yeah. That, like what Josh was talking about earlier. The thing that happens before while we are here, and that was the way I read it too. I just didn't know if like what actual thing that this person is doing was like some sort of thing that I just don't know about, like the actual work with the holes and I thought maybe it was just like some obscure part of that infrastructure setting it up that nobody does anymore.
There's 2 sets of theories online that I've seen, and that it's either oil digging or railroading.
I thought it was oil at first too.
I think it's just, they say some are looking for bones and some are doing steel. I think it's just all of it. Like, I think it's a generic, not generic, it's a generalized, a lot of folks doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I saw one, and this one is a stretch, though I thought it was kind of cool, so I'll note it. They say a couple of the things they describe here, they talk about the fire, but the handles and the chucks and the hole by hole. Someone said, and there was one more word in there, I forget which one it was. Oh, and the drawing out steel. Someone said it sounds kind of like the way it's described almost feels like the clack of a typewriter. And what if he's describing the process of writing? I don't think that's it, but it's a neat way of thinking.
Well,
I like what that person was doing.
Yeah, I do too, because I had a similar one where I was thinking it was fences, barbed wire.
Yeah, sure.
Hole by hole. Yeah, the post hole digger putting in the fences. Barbed wire is literally the thing that ended the days of the Wild West. The
Yes.
invention of
Yes.
barbed wire is what changed all of that. So, but that was me linking my knowledge of this special I had seen about barbed wire,
Right.
and I was like, so maybe that's not it. But again, like you're saying, the drawing out the steel and the how he describes the digging of the holes, and then how a fence, putting up that fence, could also be sort of like this general, idea of, I mean, fences represent, the advancement of people claiming shit,
Property.
taking over shit,
Yes.
property. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was kind of, but again, like I thought maybe, or it could be some other kind of thing they had to do for infrastructure out there that I just don't know about, because it happened way back then. Something they had to do for the telegrams or something.
One thing I know for sure is the judge says earlier in the novel that like those who like carve in stone are trying to do are altering the world itself. They're like
Yes.
making something
Yeah.
permanent and that's going to last. And noting that and talking about the whole, like the fire that God had put there and people doing that, it just feels like property and industrialization sort of taking hold over this wilderness.
Yeah, it doesn't matter so much what kind of infrastructure there is. It matters that there's infrastructure, right? There's this fence being drawn out. There's this track being laid through this trackless waste. There is this border being drawn. And there is this mythology springing up around the drawing of that border, each man tabernacling in another and, bearing witness to the uttermost edge of the world, however skewed the glass through which they look may be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think begs the question: are we the wanderers in search of bones?
Yeah. Or which one are we in that group behind them?
Guy like me is trying to find some bones. I don't know. I don't have a good it's an interesting thing, and it's interesting, and it ties in, I think, interestingly with like novels that like take place later, like All the Pretty Horses, like No Country for Old Men, where you see McCarthy is deeply aware of the violence necessary in the maintenance of a border between two states. That's something he's deeply aware of. For whatever his politics are, I know he's aware of that.
Absolutely.
Not just in the early days, but in the later days as well, that the violence inherent in that intersection between two societies, and the idea in when law enforcement comes into it, and pseudo law enforcement in the sense of these like deputized Glantonites or whatever. One gets the idea, and it's an idea that I tend to agree with, that in McCarthy's perfect world, and I get this from All the Pretty Horses and its sequel novels, that in McCarthy's perfect world, there weren't going to be these border fences. It's going to be a lot of folks riding around on horses, eating tortillas, and everybody being bilingual.
Yep.
I think that's McCarthy. I don't know that he has like a developed idea of a socio-economic and political system that undergirds that. But I think in his ideal world, there's a lot of eating of tortillas, and there's a lot of folks riding back and forth between little towns speaking English and Spanish. Which is why I reject the narrative that some people have put forward, that this epilogue is supposed to be like hopeful somehow. I don't think it's supposed to be deeply negative, but I don't like the narrative that people are like, oh, he's saying now the Wild West era is over and we brought civility to the wasteland.
No, nothing ends.
No way. He just said the judge says he'll never die.
He literally, and it's a succession of moments. That's what it is. It's just a succession of moments, each one represented by those who were fucked up enough to survive them.
Then they all move on again.
And then they all move on again. That's another one of those, things that keeps coming up. He says it several times. It's repeated throughout the novel. And they wrote on. And they wrote on. Then they wrote on.
And they wrote on, man. That needs to go along with like "So It Goes" from Kurt Vonnegut.
They wrote on and they spit dryly. These
Uh-huh.
motherfuckers spitting dryly, or just spitting. Motherfuckers be spitting. If you ain't got
Yeah.
nothing to say, spit. That'll
Yeah,
work.
that's the thing. If they had water recently, it's spit. If they hadn't, it's spit dryly, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I'm not spitting anything that like a lizard's gonna come up and lick up. That's all. Like, no, that's all mine right there. Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man.
Cormac
Well,
McCarthy was spitting, I tell you what.
yeah,
Yes, he
with
was.
this
That
book
man
for
was
real.
spitting.
Mm.
Yeah, man. This is man, this is a just a hell of a novel, and hell of a just reading it is a it's a deeply it's deeply intense experience, but man, it's been great. It was great. It's been great chopping it up with y'all about it.
Absolutely.
Just as we sort of move into the ending, I guess. I mean, we've already said a lot of it, but what do you think we can take away from this? What is something we can learn? I have kind of a thought on it. But I wanted to see what takeaways y'all have, and I don't mean like, oh, how then shall we decolonialize the, I don't, not even doing that, I mean, hell, if
Yeah,
you
no, I
got
know
an
what you mean.
idea, then throw it out there. But like, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
I'm interested to hear what Josh has to say on this one here. Having never read any Cormac before, and
Yeah, it's a good
I'll let you
question.
roll on that.
I mean, to me, it's just look. Don't let other people tell you what your life means. You know,
Mhm.
Okay.
because it kind of got something going in my head. Shoot, I'm losing it. I'm losing it. It kind of got something going in my head when we were talking about, the people fucked up to survive. Oh yeah, the people. Then they all move on, right? The people
Yeah.
most invested in saying that there is a moment that happened at that point in the past from which we need to move on, right? And it has no effect on us today in this day and age. The people who are telling you that are trying to sell you something. That's the
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. I think for me, it's one of those novels that can teach a lot of people. I think it can show a lot of people who have a. It can open people's eyes to the reality of a lot of things and make them see that maybe make them see behind a little bit of that mythology. But not just in the American experiment, but just in the way the world works in general. A lot of Cormac's novels um, ultimately come down to this, and that is it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, cold reality of it is what it is, and um, and that is sometimes fucked up. It's disturbing. A lot of the times it's fucked up and disturbing, especially in this place, because that's this this place where this novel is set, where the man writing it, everything. He said famously, books are made of books. All the books that he read, a lot of that stuff. It is the culmination of all that, and it is not anything that's like. I guess that you can really draw any definitive conclusions from, except that um, maybe war is God. you know,
Mm.
uh, like and when everything else is stripped away, if you're in when the world gets how it can get, um, like it is in this book and in the road, and even in Child of God for Lester Ballard and the people he interacts with. Like it just it is what it is. you know, it's it the and a lot of that time it's fucked up. You just don't hear about it because, like you're saying before, the people that told you aren't going to tell you about the fucked up parts. A lot of the
Mm.
time, the person that's going to tell you about the fucked up parts is the weird um, renegade writer dude who's literally just trying to um, whose mission is to do just that. He's the only one that's
Yeah.
going to do it. We're lucky that he got famous and did it,
Mhm.
but I bet a
The
lot
guy
of
who knew from the beginning he wasn't going to be a good citizen, like he said.
right. So I think that's take that at least, that people
Mm.
can hopefully peel back some of that mythology.
Absolutely. And I think the last thing that's worth noting is, Holden, he's bragging that he'll never die, and he hasn't. But
No, we
we'll
haven't.
it's I think it really is the job of each and every one of us to honestly, one way or another, we've got to square up with Holden
Try
in our
to
own
square the
lives and
fuck up. Yep.
Mm.
That's
societally.
it.
Because Holden says he'll never die, but we'll see about that.
Yep.
That's I think another thing that we need to take away. But yeah,
Mm.
I really appreciate y'all. I really want to before I have a quote I want to close this out on, but before I do that, I wanted to Drew, I wanted to give you a chance. If you have anything you want to plug, anything you want to say, anything you want to close out on. We don't got a ton of listeners, but we've got more listeners this week than the week before and more than the week before that. So, who knows how many folks do listen to this.
I just, only thing I got to say is how much I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. I had a blast in this conversation, and I am down to do it anytime y'all want to do it. So
Hell
give me a
yeah.
holler.
Hell yeah, I love you too, dude.
Man, I really appreciate it. Well, yeah, y'all follow him on Twitter. It's at DKP Mason.
Yeah, that's
Is that
the hand. Yeah, at
on
DKP
Twitter?
Mason. If you want to know about some dirt magic, you want to know about some plants and whatnot,
Mhm.
I've tried real hard, especially lately, to focus on that kind of stuff and not get too caught up in the game.
You want to
getting mad
you
at
want to
shit.
see somebody threaten Elon Musk with bodily harm?
Yeah.
Or I'm not. If you if talking shit about the police in a very violent way is not something you want to see. No, I've been refraining from that a lot of ways lately.
Mm.
Oh,
I've
man.
been stayed away from that.
No, you're good. You're good. Well, we really appreciate you very, very much. But I really wanted to close this out just because in light of Cormac McCarthy's very, recent passing. And of course, leaves a huge gap and, really was the guy that everybody was like, that was it. That was the greatest American author. And now he's gone. And man, Toni Morrison a few years ago as well. It's who knows who it is. And, it's not really important to fill it.
Maybe
but
they're out there eating beans right there.
Maybe they're
right
out there
now.
eating beans. That's exactly right. But it's a thing to think about. And it's just like, it's something to give space for. And I wanted to read a quote of Cormac's, not from this book, but from The Road, because it felt like it's the final paragraph of that book, but it felt like something he'd like as his own send off. And I kind of wanted to use it as a Socialist Shelf's send off for him, even though I'm sure we'll talk about his books again in the future. I wanted to read this paragraph here. She said that the breath of God was his breath, yet though it passed from man to man through all of time. Once there were brook trout in the streams and the mountains. You could see them standing in the amber current where the white edges of their fins wimpled softly in the flow. They smelled of moss in your hand, polished and muscular and torsional. On their backs were vermiculate patterns that were maps of the world and its becoming. Maps and mazes of a thing which could not be put back, not be made right again. In the deep glens where they lived, all things were older than man, and they hummed of mystery. Appreciate y'all coming on. Y'all have a good one.
Always a pleasure.